Good evening, boils and ghouls, freaks and geeks, creatures of all ages. Welcome to the Midnight Sideshow podcast. I'm your host, Darth Nate, and today we're going to be covering one of my favorite movies from my childhood, one of my favorite Halloween movies of all time, that was written and I don't know if it was directed, but it was written by R.L. Stine, based on his book, The Haunting Hour, which this movie would eventually spawn a TV series called The Haunting Hour, which was another one of my favorite childhood series, besides the Goosebumps TV series. But before we get into today's podcast, I want to just say a few words. This is the first episode of this podcast, so I'm a little nervous about posting it. So if you hear me going like, or just slowing down or making, random noises, I'm very nervous that this podcast will flop. So just bear with me. I'm hoping it doesn't flop because I've spent pretty much all week writing the script for this, and, now I'm just recording it as of, August 23rd. I'm hoping to have it out by the end of the month, but you never know. And second of all, I am hoping to eventually cover the Goosebumps series on this podcast, because this podcast is going to be mostly based on horror and sideshow attractions and freak shows, stuff like that, where it's going to be more of a spooky type thing, because that's how my personality is, honestly. Like, you cannot go a day without hearing me make a horror movie reference or quote or whatever. But this podcast is also going to be kind of a personal thing for me, because I feel like it's the one chance I get to let all my creativity out. So if you are all interested in seeing more of this podcast, please let me know in the comments. Like I said, I plan to have this out by the end of August and have another episode sometime in September, right before Halloween. So yeah, that's about it. But today we're talking about one of my favorite horror movies that is a children's horror movie of all time. R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour, Don't Think About It. Starring Emily Osment, it is a movie about a goth girl who feels out of place in her family, and she's new to a school, and she, on her first day, gets bullied by the entire school because of this one girl named Priscilla, and so as she's fuming, she walks downtown and discovers a magical Halloween store that is run by Tobin Bell, not as himself. The character is played by Tobin Bell, which kudos to them for getting horror royalty in a children's horror movie. For those of you who don't know, Tobin Bell is Jigsaw from the Saw movies. Still one of my favorite franchises of all time, except for the later films. The later films kind of sucked, but I'm getting off track here. But basically, Emily Osment's character goes into the Halloween store, and the Halloween store owner, played by Tobin Bell, sells her a book called The Evil Thing. But little does Emily's character know, the book may be more than what she bargained for. So without further ado, let's get into my analysis and dissection of this film and why I think it is a Halloween classic. Now, to start off, like I said in the beginning, this film is starring Emily Osment as a goth girl named Cassie, And the first thing we see of her, well, we don't get to see her right away. First, we see her little brother call his parents into their room for what the mother says was the 4th time, and the father says was the 5th time, but the boy, Max, he keeps saying that it's the 3rd time. And we get a pretty quick idea that Max is a little bit of a, for lack of a better word, scaredy cat. And so he calls his parents into his room because the closet door creaked open, and he tells them to move around a G.I. Joe doll. He tries everything he can to get them to stay in his room with him, so he doesn't, get attacked by whatever monster he thinks is in his closet or something. But he eventually is, I think the word would be capitulated by his parents saying that they'll buy him a certain video game that he wants if he goes to bed without calling them into his room again. So the parents leave his room, and he notices the closet door opening even more. So he gets out of bed to investigate. And one thing I noticed is this kid is supposed to be afraid of everything, but he cuddles at night with the creepiest freaking monkey doll that I have ever seen. Like, I used to have one of those at my great-grandpa's house, and those things are creepy. So I would be more afraid of the monkey rather than being afraid of a freaking G.I. Joe doll. But nonetheless, he goes to the closet, and all of a sudden a green monster hand just jumps out of the closet and grabs him. But then we realize it's Emily Osment's character, Cassie, just trying to scare him because he apparently broke her DVD player. It's a little bit overkill to kind of scare the shit out of him over something as small as a DVD player. But, it is 2007. DVD players were probably more expensive back then than they are now. But, he screams for his parents, and Cassie's like, bye-bye video game. And she walks into the hall. Her parents come out into the hall and ask her if he's okay. And she's like, yeah, I reassured him. And the kid, Max, is like, no, she tried to scare me. And so Cassie gets into an argument with her mom. Because we get the idea that Cassie is very jealous of her brother. Because his parents seem to favor him, and it's kind of hinted at throughout the movie that the parents don't really understand Cassie, as she's, a stereotypical goth girl from the 2000s. But she goes to her room, and the next scene she's at school, and she doesn't have any friends, but she notices this guy played by, I forgot his name, I think it's Cody Lindley or something. Basically the go-to blonde dude from Disney Channel, where I think he was in Sweet Life of Zack and Cody at some point or something like that. Maybe Hannah Montana. No, it was Hannah Montana. He played Hannah's on and off again boyfriend. But she instantly gets a crush on him and stares at him for a while. And then the scene ends when she closes her locker. So breaking down what's been happening so far, we get a good idea that Cassie feels like an outcast in her family, but not just in her family, but also in her school. And she feels like she's the only one who, understands what it's like to be like her, like the whole, it's not a phase, mom thing. But then we cut to the lunchroom, and in the lunchroom, Cassie sees, I think his name in the movie is Sean, played by Cody Lindley. She sees Sean in there again, and he's talking about how if he doesn't finish a book report on this big ass book of Edgar Allan Poe. He wasn't going to be able to quote, and I quote, play ball, which is like this huge fucking stereotype with Disney movies and stuff where, oh, if I don't, get better grades, I can't play ball. And I'm like, what ball do you want to take? Because he doesn't clarify what type of ball game he's playing. He just says ball. But Cassie ends up talking to him from across the lunchroom, and she's like, I've read that book. Poe was like a horror legend, and but then Priscilla, the mean girl, shows up, and she gets jealous of how Cassie is talking to Sean, and butts in and offers to do Sean's book report for him if he goes to the Halloween dance with her. So we already get the idea that Priscilla is somewhat of a bitch. She's like the mean girl stereotype that every Disney movie had at the time. And the funny part is, this isn't even a Disney movie. I've heard it was straight to DVD, but it did air on Cartoon Network in 2007, 3 days after it was released on DVD, which I actually have one of the original copies of the DVD with the slipcover and the original case, non-damaged, and I hope to keep it that way. But in the DVD case for the movie when it was originally released, there was a coupon for Papa John's pizza, which we'll get back to why that was later. But first, Cassie is upstaged by Priscilla, and as Cassie gets up to walk away, someone bumps his tray into her, and she gets food all over her, like that whole stereotype from Disney. And Priscilla starts making everyone laugh at her, and she's like, wait, don't move, don't get that food off you, it's an improvement. And I'm like, someone please hold me back, because I mean, they really did a good job making a hateable character, even though, it's just a character. Like, I just hate Priscilla in the movie. She is like a Karen, but like before Karens, if that makes sense. But let's talk a little more about some of the backstory from this movie before we continue. We're gonna take a quick break for if there's gonna be any ads or anything, but we're gonna take a quick break and we'll be right back. And we're back. Welcome back to the Midnight Sideshow podcast. For those of you who haven't guessed, yes, I'm trying to do this all in one take, with minimum editing, because I want it to be as candid as possible. But let's get back to the review. So, basically, this movie was directed by not directed by R.L. Stine, but it was written. It was based on his original Haunting Hour book, and it basically was previewed on Cartoon Network in 2007, preceded, I should say, by a whole Goosebumps marathon for the whole month of October 2007, leading up to when they aired the movie. And obviously, Goosebumps is a huge R.L. Stine property, if not the biggest R.L. Stine property. You've probably at least seen the books if you haven't read them, and you might have seen some of the DVD covers at your library or something like that. But it's basically campy children's horror written by R.L. Stine, whereas The Haunting Hour, Goosebumps was meant for 7 to 11-year-olds by Stine's own words. However, The Haunting Hour, including the eventual Haunting Hour TV series, was meant for young teens to teens. As it was a little darker, more mature, and Goosebumps and the Haunting Hour are just his most known properties, as well as the Fear Street series, which was meant for more teens to young adults. And R.L. Stine is actually one of my favorite authors of all time. It's a bucket list item for me to meet him one day and have him sign a copy of one of my Goosebumps books. But he started out writing some humor books, including, putting jokes in joke magazines and stuff. And he even penned the novelization of Ghostbusters 2, which, how perfect is that? He has been around for a very long time. And he's probably one of the most beloved children's horror authors of all time. Not that there are many of those, but he's the most beloved. In fact, he is often called the Stephen King of children's horror. Which I think, that's pretty fitting, because in both Stephen King's novels and R.L. Stine's novels, there's some sort of weird magic always at play, or something like that going on. That's kind of interesting, the parallels between them. Stephen King is another one of my favorite authors. But, so yeah, this movie was preceded by a Goosebumps marathon, where for the whole month of October in 2007, it was just the Goosebumps TV show from the 90s being aired on Cartoon Network. And at this point, Cartoon Network was more like live action network than Cartoon Network, because they were starting to get shows like Destroy, Build, Destroy, and other live action shows, which a lot of people probably didn't really care for, from what I've heard. However, I was one of those kids who I loved it no matter what. I was raised on Cartoon Network, and Disney Channel and Nickelodeon, and all of those are kind of like holding a special place in my heart. I remember on Nickelodeon there was this show called The Troop or something like that, where it was like this group of teenagers who were fighting monsters, and that was my first experience with horror. And I admit sometimes it scared me, but looking back at the show, how crappy the CGI was kind of a little funny. But with this movie, they don't go CGI for most of the movie, except for a few minutes towards the end of the movie, where, well, I'm not gonna spoil it, we'll get to that eventually, but it's mostly practical effects in this movie with occasional CGI, but not so much that it looks horrible, because I'm a huge practical effects fan, personally, but I'll take CG over, crap effects any day. But getting off topic here, so basically back to the story of this movie. The movie continues with Cassie going into her room after school and playing this discount emo music while the movie flashes back to scenes we literally just saw 5 seconds ago. So I don't know what the point of the flashback is, except to add more time. Which, another thing that adds more time to the movie that I feel like is only there because it adds more time, is the 3 fucking minute long intro. The intro is 3 minutes long, and I mean, don't get me wrong, it's awesome because it's all these Halloween decorations being shown next to the theme song. But holy crap, they did not need to make the intro 3 minutes long. I mean, granted, I made my intro as long as I did because I wrote the music for it and I wanted to use the whole song that I made for it. But, yeah, I think there are some scenes in the movie that could have been cut to save time, but, getting off track again. So Cassie ends up going to the downtown area to stop at the library, and on her way she notices an alley with a Halloween store in the middle of the alley, like that no one would ever see, but she notices it. So she decides, oh, that's probably a good idea to go in there, even though, she's never seen that store before. I mean, granted, she's new to town, but she's never seen that store before. And it's in the middle of a dark, creepy alley. Like, what are the chances she's not gonna get murdered? But she goes in, and we meet the excellent Tobin Bell, who plays a character called the Stranger. They never really give him a name, they just call him the Stranger. But he ends up selling her this book called The Evil Thing, which is the catalyst of what happens for the rest of the story. So she haggles with him for a bit. She's like, how much is the book? And the Stranger's like, how much would you pay? And she's like, $5. And he instantly grabs the $5 out of her hand. He's like, sold. Pushes her out of the store, locks the door behind her, and closes the store. And I'm thinking, there should be some sort of red flag there that he was that fast to get you out of the store as soon as you bought this creepy ass book that looks like the Necronomicon from Evil Dead. But she opens the book, which is locked with a key, and the wind starts blowing, it starts picking up leaves and stuff, and the front page of the book starts slowly fading into a page that says, do not read aloud, which will come back later. But anyways, it cuts to the lunchroom again after the scene, and Priscilla is sitting at the table, and all of a sudden the speaker in the lunchroom goes off, and it's like, oh, we're gonna announce the Pumpkin Queen, and it's no surprise that it becomes Priscilla, and Cassie's sitting next to the lunch lady, kind of just being a little broody, I guess, and so Cassie asks the lunch lady, what's the whole deal with the Pumpkin Queen? Why is it so important? And the lunch lady, it's like she worships the Pumpkin Queen or some shit. She answers as if, or she acts as if, like, she's basically gotten elected president. And she says something along the lines of, oh, it's a beautiful tradition, the music, the poetry, the piñata, only the queen gets to hit open the piñata. And Cassie's like, Queen Priscilla? And the lunch lady looks at her like as if to say, the audacity of this bitch. And she slops on some sloppy joe onto a bun, and she's like, Her Majesty. And I'm like, there has to be some sort of like cult that worships the Pumpkin Queen in the school, because like the way she answered as if she had just asked like something that she shouldn't have, it's just funny. But then we cut to Cassie coming home again, and she has this package come while her parents are playing this video game that they've got for Max. And Max is apparently afraid of the video game, even though it's literally just the crappiest looking, like, rareware game, I guess. I couldn't think of, like, an actual game company that I could call crappy, but basically, it looks like the CGI squirrel throwing nut bombs at a bird, and the kid's acting like it's the scariest thing ever. Like, he's acting like he's watching his parents play frickin' Dead by Daylight. But Cassie gets a package, and she's like, oh, it's for the dance, because her mom asks her what the package is for, and her mom's like, I thought you weren't going to the dance, and Cassie's like, oh, I changed my mind. So it cuts to Cassie at the dance, and this dance is like the most Halloween dance since Hocus Pocus. Like, this looks like a scene, like, it literally looks side by side, like the scene at the party from Hocus Pocus. And it's like, unrealistic, which sucks that it's unrealistic, but it's like, there's not that many people who would be at a Halloween party like that, in real life. Kind of like how in some movies, for trick-or-treating, they have, like, thousands of extras, like, kids playing extras who go trick-or-treating, whereas in reality, especially nowadays, barely anyone goes trick-or-treating anymore, which sucks, because, you know, it's like the best part of Halloween. But we cut to Cassie at the Halloween party, and she's sneaking around into the back area of the party. She tells the people who were guarding the piñata that the principal wants them to go take care of something. I forgot what she exactly said, but as they leave, she opens up a jar of cockroaches and puts them into the piñata, and immediately the mind goes to Carrie, except instead of pig's blood, it's cockroaches. So Cassie leaves as soon as she's done dumping the cockroaches into the piñata, and it cuts to them lowering the piñata for Priscilla, and she hits it open, and the cockroaches fall all over her, and everyone's gasping and in shock, and she falls and face plants right into the fucking cake. And Cassie starts laughing, and then everyone starts laughing. And then the next day, Priscilla is taking down flyers of her campaign from the Halloween dance, and she notices that they have been vandalized in some way, making her, or calling her the cockroach queen and stuff like that. So she ends up taking them all down and getting all angry at Cassie. So in class the next time, she asks Sean to take out what looks like Cassie's diary, but is actually the book The Evil Thing. And so he takes it out of her backpack, and opens it, and immediately the wind outside starts blowing around, and he instantly closes it and shoves it back into her backpack. And meanwhile, before this happens, Cassie's going on a whole rant to the teacher about the whole how Halloween was originally All Hallows Eve and all that. So that's kind of, that's something I would have done in high school too, where I would have been like, oh, Halloween used to be all this whole thing where we were, because, I still am super into Halloween. I wouldn't be making this podcast if I wasn't. But yeah, and then it cuts to trick-or-treating with Cassie and Max going trick-or-treating, but Max wants to go to this one house because they have wax lips, but I don't remember if it's the guy at the house who scares him or if it's the music that scares him, but he's too scared to go to the house to get wax lips. So Cassie ends up storming home with him in tow, and his parents end up going to get the wax lips for this spoiled ass kid. And basically they just the parents then go to a Halloween party, which what is it with parents in Halloween movies leaving to go to every party just so the plot can continue? Like, I get it. I literally just said why they do it, because it makes the plot continue. But still, it might as well just not have the parents in the movie at all. Because the parents are less than useless. But we're gonna take another quick break, and hear a word from, well, not from our sponsors. It's just gonna be a word on the next episode. We're gonna be doing a quick preview. And then when we get back, I will be talking about, the movie some more. Have you ever wanted to listen to ghost stories, but you have no one to tell them to you? Well, tune in next time to the Midnight Sideshow podcast, where we will be reading a few quote-unquote true ghost stories and deep diving into the whole ghost story phenomena and stuff like that. Feel free to join us on wherever this podcast is going to be uploaded, which for now will just be the Midnight Sideshow YouTube channel at youtube.com/midnightsideshow. And hopefully you can all eventually come and listen to this podcast on a weekly basis, as I hope to make this my main project for the year, or for this year and next year, that is. But we will also be doing an episode in a couple weeks about Goosebumps, hopefully, as well as an episode possibly about the history of Halloween, an episode about Halloween Horror Nights from Universal, and then the only other episode I have planned is an episode about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch and Creepshow, which the Creepshow episode will also be talking about the 50s horror comics like Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, Haunt of Fear, stuff like that. So if you're interested in any of that, feel free to tune into this YouTube channel when we upload, and we hope to see you there while we rave to the grave. And we're back. Welcome back to the podcast. So where we left off, Max and Cassie had just gotten done with trick-or-treating. The parents had left the kids alone at their house, and right at the moment in the movie, Cassie is typing up her book project or something about monsters. It shows on the screen that she's talking about like how all the monster movies and stuff were all created. And Max is kind of wanting her to read a bedtime story, so he notices the book The Evil Thing, and he's like, I want that book. And Cassie says, well, I'll read you Berenstein Bears. This book will scare you. And he's like, I don't like those stupid bears. They suck. And he's being his usual bratty self. Until finally he purposely turns off Cassie's computer while she's working on it, which apparently deleted everything that she was working on. Granted, this was 2007, so obviously autosave probably wasn't the thing. But she gets all angry and decides to read him the book, and she reads it out loud, which, as we covered earlier, was told not to be done. And meanwhile, she's reading the story about a monster with two heads, one that sucks your blood, the other chews your meat, and how its babies come out of eggs on its sack, or eggs on its back. And so Cassie's reading it out loud, and meanwhile, Priscilla and Sean are planning to scare her. Well, it's more Priscilla planning to scare her as revenge, but so the power goes out because Priscilla trips the breaker, and so Cassie and Max go outside to investigate and end up getting a Halloween decoration launched on them, and they start freaking out, and Priscilla gets it all on camera. And so Cassie is mad at Sean and Priscilla for basically getting revenge on what she did to them, because these bitches be petty. But Sean apologizes and shows that, he didn't want to follow through with the plan. It was all Cassie's idea, or not Cassie's, Priscilla's idea. And he tells Max, you're a brave kid or something like that. And they go away. Meanwhile, a tornado of leaves starts blowing by, and a monster's hand reaches reaches up out of a pile of leaves, and it cuts to a pizza guy who is just getting home from a delivery, and he makes a joke about how his tip was a bag of candy corn, which I don't understand candy corn hate. I love candy corn. I'm one of those people who loves it. So the pizza guy is, he works for Papa John's, which, we'll get into that now. Basically, in the DVD case of the movie, there was hold on, let me actually grab it real quick because I have it right next to me. In the DVD case of this movie, it came with a coupon originally for a free order of Papa John's cheese sticks with an online purchase of a large specialty pizza at regular menu price. And so Papa John's was basically this huge product placement in that movie, or in this movie. And so that's why the Papa John's guy is in the movie delivering food. Sorry, I had to put that away because I don't want it getting damaged. But basically, the pizza guy gets in his car, and the monster rips off the door and kidnaps the pizza driver. And then it cuts to Max brushing his teeth, and he notices something scary walk past him, but he didn't notice it fully, so he just kind of shrugs it off. And so later he's in bed, and all of a sudden his closet door opens just like the beginning, and a tail kind of slithers out and wraps itself around the doorknob, pulling it open. And Max hides under his bed, and the monster is crawling around. It eventually jumps onto his bed to look for him, and then a false jump scare happens where he rips off the monkey's head that Max was cuddling earlier and leaves it on the floor. And I thought as soon as I saw that, oh good, the monkey's dead. Because if he was afraid of everything else and not that monkey, I would have been concerned. Very tired while recording this. So the monster eventually kidnaps Max, and then it cuts to Priscilla and Sean at the park rewatching the footage. Sean doesn't like that Priscilla is replaying the footage over and over and over again because it's basically proof of them bullying someone, and Sean wants to go apologize to Cassie, and Priscilla's like, well, I won't write your term paper if you go apologize, and he's like, well, fuck you, bitch. He doesn't actually say that, but he basically tells her off in a way that kind of is reminiscent of that, and he walks away with the camera, but then Priscilla screams. And when he gets back, there's slime everywhere where Priscilla was. And the monster has taken Priscilla, and he sees the monster and runs to go warn Cassie about it. And as Cassie opens the door, he is sounding insane, being like, oh, the monster got Priscilla, the monster got Max. And she doesn't believe him, obviously, because they just pulled that prank on him. Or on her. So, at first she doesn't believe him, but he forces his way in and shows her the slime on Max's windowsill. And that is enough to make her believe that the monster is actually real. So they follow the slime trail into the sewer and find the monster's lair. And the monster is this awesome practical puppet by Greg Nicotero and Howard Berger, I believe, as well, from K&B Effects. And they did an awesome job. It's genuinely a good, creepy monster design. So kudos to them. But they get scared off by the monster and eventually run to where the Halloween store is, because Cassie's like, oh, the Halloween store, I'll get the weirdo who sold us the book. Maybe he knows how to destroy the monster. And Sean has an epic voice crack, which always sticks in my head. What a weirdo! They go to the Halloween store, and Tobin Bell is actually luckily packing up and getting in his car, and he tells her, oh, well, you wanted to scare people, right? And she's like, no, this isn't what I wanted. And so he gives them a cryptic hint. 2 heads are better than 1. That's what gets the bloody job done. So instantly they're like, okay, we need to get the wring out the blood from this roast and splash the blood on the evil thing's blood-sucking head instead of the meat-chewing head, because then if the blood-sucking head sees the blood on the meat-chewing head, it'll attack itself and basically self-destruct. So as they're wringing out the roast for blood, which they wouldn't get that much blood realistically from wringing out a roast, but Max is hidden in the cocoons in the sewer, and we get a good look at the babies of the evil thing, which look like the monsters from Monster Blood 4, if anyone remembers those from the Goosebumps series, where these little slug things, except they have teeth instead of the big lips like the Monster Blood 4 monsters do. And so the monsters' babies start attacking, but Max launches one of them and smacks the baby against the sewer wall, and it frickin' dies. And so Max and Cassie decide to lure out the creature and get it to kind of get away from Max so they can save him. So they play these spooky sounds on a radio, but then the monster hits the radio and it starts playing Sean's mixtape. And the monster destroys the radio. So they sneak into the sewer with the gallon of blood, and Max is freed from the cocoon, and he's like, oh, I'm too scared, I don't want to throw the blood on the monster, I'm too scared. And Cassie's like, you're a brave boy, I love you, Max. And her saying I love you to him finally gives him the courage to splash the blood on the evil thing, and the evil thing starts eating itself alive and eventually explodes in this giant yellow paint type blood mess, including all the babies. And so they free Max from the rest of the cocoon. They free Priscilla and the pizza driver from the cocoon. Priscilla is like, oh, my dad's a lawyer, I'm gonna sue you so hard, and she tries to get Sean to go with him, but Sean has been goth pilled. So he's like, I think I'm gonna stay with Cassie and walk her home. And Priscilla's like, we are so through, and walks away. And they free the pizza guy, who gives them free pizza. Another reason why the Papa John's pizza thing was in the DVD case. And so the movie ends with them eating pizza and showering off all the gunk and stuff before Cassie and Max end up cuddling each other and falling asleep in Max's bed. And the parents finally get home, notice the roast wasn't done, and the dad takes the evil thing book out of the fire where Cassie and Sean and Max had thrown the book into. And the dad reads the book aloud, and the closet door starts opening, and the movie ends with Cassie opening her eyes, hearing the closet door open. So, I guess sequel bait, but the sequel never came. I hope they do make a sequel one of these days. I know it won't be as good as the original, but I would love to see another sequel of it. But basically, we're gonna go on another break, and when we get back, I will give my final thoughts on the movie. So, final thoughts on the movie. I still think it holds up to this day. There is a few scenes that don't hold up as much anymore, But I still think if you are wanting to give your kids a spooky Halloween party, this would be the perfect movie to bring out and watch on Halloween. You can get it from Amazon, I believe, or eBay. I don't think anywhere else sells it anymore because I haven't seen it released since 2007. But I know I got my copy off of Amazon, so Amazon might be the best place to order from. But basically, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give the movie a solid 9.5. Like I said, some things don't hold up as much. I think at one point, Priscilla does say the R slur, which, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of that word, and I just don't want to use it. But other than that, this movie is a really good movie. I genuinely still think that this is one of my favorite movies of all time, especially for Halloween. And do I recommend it? I do. And I think if you can find it, like either on Amazon or at your local library or something, I think you're gonna have a fun time with this movie. But with that being said, this has been the first episode of the Midnight Sideshow podcast. I've been your host, Darth Nate, and I hope to see you on the darker side. See ya.